Yo, what those and welcome back to Reviews with Jake, where I just got done watching 7500. 7500 is the story about a plane that is in the process of being hijacked by terrorists. The hook is that the story is being told 100% from the cockpit from the perspective of the co-pilot, who is played by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Seemed like an appropriate choice for this week, considering I was supposed to be on a plane to California this week, but COVID decided to come around and punch that entire state in the mouth again, and here I am still back at home. I said it before and I'll say it again. 2020, man. What the hell? Another thing that I've said before is the importance of the perspective of a story as it's being told. As the old adage goes, it's not necessarily the story that you tell, but how you tell it. You can tell people a story that they've heard 1,000 times before and still have them dig it if you find a new, interesting way to approach it. And perspective can be that approach. Seeing and hearing a story from a certain perspective, a certain vantage point, can make all of the difference. Like, I've never read any of the Song of Ice and Fire books before, but I know that George R. R. Martin wrote them from various characters' perspectives, and that doesn't shock me. He realized the power of perspective. There's a lot of great stories out there that utilize this very powerful and interesting tool. So telling a story like this, a plane being hijacked, big whoop, seen it before, whatever. But you throw in a twist of a locked perspective, especially one coming from the pilot of the plane being hijacked, now that's interesting. You have my attention. Like I said in my review of Vast of Night, I love stories that are being told from kind of a safe distance, like Pontypool, which I mentioned in that review. That's a story of a zombie apocalypse, but being told from inside a radio station and not outside in the chaos. You know that the chaos is happening, but you don't necessarily see it firsthand. That is cool as hell to me, and taking kind of that approach and applying it to this scenario where you're handing the perspective to a pilot who has control over the airplane technically, but also at the same time in this scenario doesn't. I mean, you could do a lot of really cool things with that. That's a brilliant $1 million idea, and I was hooked upon hearing that was the case with this film despite it having a rather unoriginal story. And the pros start right there. This film masterfully used the power of perspective, especially in the first half of the film. Gordon-Levitt's character in this movie, the pilot, genuinely has all of the power, yet he is powerless, and you really feel the weight of every decision that he is forced to make. This is reinforced by some very interesting yet effective directing and editing decisions that play with the things that are being shown on screen that may be considered unconventional, but very intentional. Something as simple as treating a conversation between Gordon-Levitt's character and someone sitting right next to him in the same room, obviously in the cockpit, where they choose to not jump back and forth with the camera between the two having a conversation. They keep the camera locked on Gordon-Levitt's character. And that's brilliant because this whole movie is about illustrating from his perspective. You see every nuance and expression whenever he's asked a question. You don't just see the reactionary shot once the other guy's done talking. You see him almost in real time just listening to him in this conversation and seeing every bit of him. Decisions like this are subtle, but they make all the difference when you're really trying to drive this concept home. Speaking of decisions of what they choose to show you, this film had awesome cinematography. I mean, they had a great variety of shots despite it all taking place within this very small confined space. This film had excellent use of color and light. It never felt stale despite it all taking place within this very small place that's like smaller than a jail cell. You'd think that there were only so many different ways that you could shoot within this tiny little capsule, but they find so many different ways to keep it fresh and it never gets old. This movie also had some fantastic acting performances from Joseph Gordon-Levitt as well as Omid Memar. I really hope I'm saying that right. So sorry if that was wrong, because these two marquee actors and characters really just had to bring it. I mean, the camera was right in their faces this entire movie. Every move, every detail, every expression is just so well documented center stage, and you just really can't slack when that's the case. It takes some high caliber acting performances to pull this off, and they did so marvelously. I also really love the sound design in this movie, as well as just the decision to not really have a soundtrack. This is a bold decision because it would be very easy to use music as a crutch to build tension, but they didn't do that. They just use really great sound design to rebuild environments to let the reality of the situation speak for itself. You genuinely feel like you're a real fly sitting on a real wall, watching real events unfold in sort of real time. Nothing about this felt fabricated. However, as much as I really enjoyed this movie, it was not perfect. Like, the second half of this movie kind of started to lose me for a little bit. Like, I was really hooked for the first half, and the second half was just kind of fine. Without diving too deep into it, because I do want to avoid spoilers, I felt like they had a winning formula on how they were kind of treating everything, especially with this use of perspective in the first half. And then in the second half, what they did was okay, but I felt like it kind of abandoned this really great winning formula that they had going in the first half. And I would have loved if they had explored that a little bit deeper than they did. On kind of that same note, I felt like they reached their emotional crescendo a little bit too early. Again, avoiding spoilers, this movie does have an emotional hook that I felt like they really could have built up a little bit more and done bigger and better things, but I felt like they failed to capitalize on it because they kind of had this thing peak a little too early, in my opinion. The antagonist of the film also kind of felt a little bit too, like, I don't know, stereotypically simple, I guess. Like, all of the hijackers except for one felt like they were just way too to the script. I mean, literally. This is probably just a matter of preference for me personally, but I feel like this type of antagonist here in 2020 has sort of played itself out. And while the rest of this movie does a pretty damn good job of paving its own path with this new interesting perspective, there are a few moments with our antagonist where it kind of just reminds you that you are watching something a bit of the same. It isn't all that original, it still is, at the end of the day, this story that you've seen before. However, though, all in all, despite this being a story that you've seen before and all being taking place in a tiny-ass room, this is a pretty damn good movie. I'm going to give 7500 a B+. I feel like movies like this have to be a studio's wet dream because you can make it with little to no budget whatsoever, but you could cash it out because the quality is there to pay out something awesome. I have absolutely no idea what the financial difference is in terms of releasing to an Amazon original and a theatrical run, but I would have really loved to see what this movie could do with a chance at the big screen. That would have been cool. But that's just me. What do you guys think? Let me know if you agree or disagree in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe to this channel to stay up to date on new reviews coming real soon. Stay safe and thanks for checking in.